When you hear the word wildfire, what comes to mind first? Towering flames, swallowing forests, thick orange skies, and evacuation alerts. For most people, wildfires are an image, a terrifying, immediate image. But behind that image is a complex web of natural causes, human actions, climate drivers, and land management decisions. Tonight, let's untangle that web. What truly drives wildfires, how arson and accidental human fires differ from nature-driven blazes, and what we can do about it.
I love that framing. Wildfire as both an event and a story. On one page of that story, you have lightning strikes, drought, and wind, purely natural factors that ignite and feed a fire. On the other page, you have careless campfires, power line failures, discarded cigarettes, and the criminal act of arson. And then above both pages looms climate change, lengthening fire seasons and drying fuels. Each factor alone matters. Together, they create the megafires that dominate headlines and social media.
Let's start with nature. Lightning is the archetypal natural ignition source. Dry lightning, thunderstorms with little rain, can light dozens of spots across a landscape. If the vegetation is primed, if fuel moisture is low, and if wind is strong, a single lightning strike can start a fire that becomes unstoppable. People often underestimate how quickly a small flame in dry grass can turn into a fast-moving fire front under the right conditions.
Right. And those right conditions are changing. Prolonged droughts, more frequent and intense heat waves, and earlier snowmelt mean forests and shrubs are drier for longer. That increases the fuel loads, the leaves, branches, dead trees, that let fires grow hotter and move faster. That's why researchers talk about longer wildfire seasons and more frequent megafires. These aren't just bigger flames, they behave differently, creating their own weather and embers that fly miles ahead of the main front.
Now, flip to human causes. A surprising portion of wildfires are human-caused, some accidental, some negligent, some deliberate. A downed power line in high winds can spark a fire. An unattended camp stove, a burning debris pile, or fireworks can ignite dry brush. Then there's arson, a criminal act where someone intentionally sets a fire. The motivations can vary wildly: vandalism, insurance fraud, attention-seeking, even political or extremist motives. Arson is devastating because it's often set in high-risk conditions intentionally to cause maximum spread.
It's important we talk about arson responsibly. We can analyze motivations, explain patterns, and discuss detection and investigation without ever providing a roadmap for wrongdoing. Investigators use patterns of ignition, witness reports, surveillance footage, cell tower records, and accelerant detection to identify intentional fires. Forensic teams and law enforcement work closely with fire scientists to determine cause and intent. And prosecutions can and do happen when evidence is strong.
Yes, we have to be clear. Arson is a crime with severe consequences. But beyond criminality, there's a gray space of human-caused accidental fires that are still preventable. Public education, strict fire bans during red flag warnings, responsible campfire practices, safe operation of equipment during high fire danger, and infrastructure upgrades. These are practical tools that reduce risk. The public often searches how to prevent wildfires or campfire safety at peak season, and that's an opportunity to push prevention messaging.
Let's talk about fire behavior. It's mesmerizing how rapidly a fire can change with conditions. Topography funnels wind, fires move faster uphill than down. Wind speed and direction can turn a controllable burn into a blow-up event. Then there's the phenomenon of crown fires, where flames leap from tree canopy to tree canopy, turning a ground fire into a landscape-consuming inferno. That's when firefighting becomes logistically and physically impossible.
On the subject of firefighting, modern techniques are a blend of boots-on-the-ground tactics and high-tech surveillance. Firefighters create defensible space, construct fire lines, and perform structure protection. Aerial firefighting, water drops from helicopters, and retardant from fixed-wing aircraft can slow progress and protect communities. And technology, satellites, drones, thermal imaging, and real-time fire modeling gives situational awareness that was unimaginable 20 years ago.
Satellites are a game changer. Systems like MODIS and VIIRS detect thermal anomalies and active fires from space, enabling early detection across vast remote regions. Drones can provide close-up thermal imaging of hotspots and help map perimeters. Combining that data with local sensors and weather models feeds predictive tools that forecast fire spread. But tech isn't a silver bullet. Resource constraints, rugged terrain, and extreme fire behavior still overwhelm systems.
We should also mention prescribed burning and indigenous fire stewardship. For millennia, many indigenous people used low-intensity fire intentionally, what we now call cultural burns, to reduce fuel loads, enhance biodiversity, and protect settlements. Modern prescribed burns, when carefully planned and executed, mimic that effect. They reduce the intensity of future wildfires and restore ecological processes. These are controversial politically, but ecologically, they're one of the most effective prevention tools.
Controversy often rises because prescribed burns carry risks. They can escape under the wrong conditions. But the alternative, letting fuel accumulate, can lead to catastrophic, uncontrolled fires. The key is strategic, science-based prescribed fire, coordinated with weather windows, trained crews, and community engagement. That's a narrative we need to amplify in public discussion. Mitigation is not just about suppression, it's about fuel management.
Now, let's talk public health and smoke. Even when the flames are contained, smoke is a pervasive hazard. Fine particulate matter, PM 2.5, from wildfire smoke penetrates deep into the lungs, exacerbating asthma, cardiovascular disease, and other conditions. Air Quality Index, AQI, spikes during wildfires. People search AQI near me or health effects of wildfire smoke en masse during events. Public information systems, distribution of N95 masks, and community clean air centers are crucial responses.
Exactly. The health impact often extends far from the fire zone. Smoke travels hundreds or thousands of miles, degrading air quality across states and even across continents. That's why a wildfire is not just a local emergency, it's a regional public health crisis. Emergency management therefore must coordinate evacuation planning, sheltering, and health advisories well beyond the fire line.
We shouldn't forget the ecological consequences and the recovery process. After a fire, ecosystems do recover. Some species are fire adapted. Certain trees have serotinous cones that open after heat, and some ecosystems depend on periodic fire. But when fires burn hotter and more frequently, they can push systems past thresholds, causing erosion, loss of seed banks, invasive species invasion, and long-term landscape change.
And then there's the carbon story. Wildfires release massive amounts of carbon dioxide, contributing to atmospheric greenhouse gases. It's a feedback loop. Climate change increases wildfire risk, and fires release carbon, accelerating climate change. That biogeochemical cycle complicates the policy landscape. Mitigation and adaptation need to happen at multiple scales, from local prescribed burns to national climate action.
Switching perspective, the social and economic impacts are tremendous. Homes and livelihoods lost, insurance premiums spiking, displacement of communities, and long-term economic recovery challenges. Insurance companies sometimes withdraw coverage from high-risk zones, which leads to further social inequities. Planning and building codes, creating defensible space, using fire-resistant materials are critical, but expensive, and not every homeowner can afford them.
Community resilience is therefore key. Neighborhood-level planning, evacuation rehearsals, mutual aid agreements, and local fuels management build adaptive capacity. Programs that fund home hardening and defensible space for vulnerable households can reduce loss and facilitate quicker recovery. That's where policy, funding, and community action meet.
Let's circle back to arson detection and law enforcement. Fire investigators use a combination of on-the-ground pattern analysis and technology. They look for the ignition point, burn patterns, witness accounts, and video footage. Increasingly, they use satellite time series and aerial imagery to pinpoint start times and spread. But proving intent is hard. Arsonists sometimes use remote ignition methods. Investigations require careful forensic science and interagency cooperation.
There's also a prevention angle. Targeted law enforcement and hotspot areas, public reporting systems, and community awareness can reduce arson incidents. Campaigns that highlight legal consequences and social costs, combined with surveillance and vulnerable corridors, reduce intentional ignitions. But again, prevention cannot be purely punitive. Addressing underlying causes like social despair, criminal networks, or deliberate political motives requires broader civic engagement.
We should stress the role of infrastructure. Power lines are a known trigger. Vegetation contacting lines, equipment failure, or downed lines in wind can spark catastrophic fires. Utilities have implemented measures, vegetation management, system hardening, and weather-based power shutoffs to mitigate this. The trade-offs are complex. Shutting off power protects lives but disrupts daily life, medical devices, and commerce. It's a difficult balance.
From the policy side, land use matters. Building in fire-prone landscapes, often called the wildland,
After the last ember dies and the helicopters have stopped thumping overhead, another crisis quietly begins, one that doesn't roar but creeps and reshapes everything. The aftermath. Imagine rivers carrying thick ribbons of ash, roads undermined by sudden floods, and neighborhoods waking to landscapes that look more like moonscapes than the forests they once knew. The emergency doesn't end when the flames go out. A whole chain of hidden disasters follows.
That slow, unseen cascade is terrifying in its own way. When vegetation combusts, the soil surface can change its chemistry and structure, becoming resistant to water. That's when a rainstorm, even a modest one, can produce walls of mud and debris racing downhill. People who thought a fire was over can be blindsided by flash floods and debris flows that destroy homes and bury roads. It's a second catastrophe wrapped inside the first.
And the water systems suffer. Streams clogged with ash and charred organic matter carry toxins into reservoirs and drinking supplies. Treatment plants strain, and small towns that relied on pristine springs suddenly face boil water advisories or weeks without potable water. That's not just inconvenience, it's a public health crisis that plays out long after the camera crews leave.
The ecological recovery is a story of surprises. In some places, fires sterilize seed banks, flipping landscapes from forest to shrubland permanently. That type conversion can open the door for fast-moving invasive plants adapted to disturb soils. Those invaders alter fire behavior in future seasons and can trap ecosystems in a less diverse state for decades. Restoration isn't just planting trees. It's a strategic chess game about species selection, soil biology, and long-term climate suitability.
There's a cutting-edge approach that's been gaining traction: assisted regeneration. Scientists and practitioners aren't simply scattering seeds, they're using seed libraries and nurseries matched to microclimates, inoculating roots with symbiotic fungi, and even using drones to place seed pods directly into remote slopes where access is impossible. It's precision ecology, trying to jumpstart a community of plants that can withstand hotter, drier conditions.
And there's biochar, turning charred biomass into a stable soil amendment that can hold water, lock carbon, and rebuild soil structure. It's a twofold win. It takes post-fire residues and turns them into something that helps the ground recover while sequestering carbon for centuries. Projects piloting biochar at burned sites are becoming real-world labs for combining recovery with climate mitigation.
Economics ripples through all of this. When a region burns, property values tumble, tourism dries up, and small businesses fail. But there's another conversation rising: managed retreat and buyouts. Instead of rebuilding in a place that will likely burn again, some communities are choosing to relocate. Buyout programs, land trusts, and conservation easements create buffers, but they're politically fraught and emotionally wrenching. You're asking people to leave home for a future that's uncertain but probable.
That choice raises tough equity questions. Who gets offered a buyout? Who can afford to move? We see patterns where low-income households are trapped in high-risk zones because they lack access to capital or insurance. Policies that subsidize relocation and retrofit for vulnerable populations can change outcomes, but the politics are brutal. It's not just fire policy, it's housing policy and social justice.
Insurance itself is mutating. The market is experimenting with parametric products, payouts triggered by measurable events like wind speeds or burn perimeter thresholds, instead of slow, contested claims. That lets communities get money fast. Reinsurance markets are also forcing regions to confront the true cost of living in fire-prone landscapes. Some insurers now tie premiums to compliance with mitigation standards, nudging homeowners toward resilience through the price signal.
On the human side, the psychological toll is enormous. Displacement, trauma, and the cumulative stress of repeated evacuations erode mental health. People report insomnia, anxiety, and a numbness that colors daily life. Community healing programs, from facilitated storytelling circles to art projects that memorialize what was lost, are critical but underfunded. Recovery plans that ignore mental health are destined to fail the people they serve.
Cultural heritage also suffers. Imagine sacred groves, historical landmarks, or centuries-old archives burned or blackened. Museums and archives scramble to salvage charred records. Communities lose physical anchors of identity. Recovery isn't just ecological or economic, it's cultural. Rebuilding must involve elders, historians, and cultural practitioners to restore those threads of continuity.
There are interesting innovations in surveillance and community reporting that don't involve major agencies. Citizen science platforms let residents upload geotagged photos of smoke or small ignitions. That crowdsourced intelligence, when combined with machine learning, can accelerate detection in complex landscapes. It raises privacy and data quality questions, but it also gives communities agency, turning every phone into a potential early warning sensor.
Technology keeps surprising us. New satellite constellations of small, inexpensive sensors now promise near real-time thermal detection and burn mapping at a cadence that older systems couldn't match. Coupled with AI models trained on historical ignitions, fuel conditions, and microclimate data, these systems can forecast ignition probabilities on a street-by-street basis. That level of granularity shifts planning from regional firefighting to neighborhood-scale preparedness.
But algorithms have blind spots. Models trained on past climates can mislead in a world where the climate itself is changing. That's why hybrid approaches that combine local knowledge from ranchers and indigenous stewards with high-tech models produce better decisions. Knowledge co-production, scientists, local managers, and residents together is proving more robust than either alone.
Firefighters and first responders are adapting too, not just tactically, but in their equipment and health monitoring. New wearable sensors track body temperature, heart rate, and exposure to particulate matter in real time, enabling medics to intervene before heat stress becomes a catastrophe. Long-term studies are following firefighters for cardiovascular and respiratory outcomes, and that data is beginning to reshape shift policies and rehabilitation programs.
Volunteer networks deserve focus. In many burn zones, informal volunteer brigades, ranchers with tractors, and community emergency response teams are the difference between containment and calamity. Strengthening these networks with training, legal protections, and equipment procurement multiplies capacity at a fraction of the cost of top-down deployments.
There's also a sobering geopolitics to consider. Smoke doesn't respect borders. Large fire seasons produce transboundary air pollution that affects neighboring countries, complicating international relations. Shared monitoring, mutual aid agreements, and cross-border resource prepositioning are the emerging norm. Climate-driven disasters may be localized in origin, but they're global in consequence.
Legal frameworks are shifting too. Courts are increasingly being asked to weigh negligence and liability when infrastructure failures spark massive blazes. Some jurisdictions are exploring stricter performance requirements for utilities and developers, including mandatory defensibility planning and financial guarantees for wildfire risk. The law is becoming an arena where the future of land use in fire-prone areas is being decided.
On the recovery front, novel financing mechanisms are emerging. Green bonds for large-scale reforestation, public-private partnerships for watershed restoration, and payment for ecosystem services models that pay landowners to manage land in ways that reduce downstream flood risk and improve water quality. These finance tools treat recovery like investment rather than a cost to be endured.
Restoring infrastructure is also inventive. Engineers are developing permeable roadbeds in engineered terraces that slow runoff on slopes scarred by fire. Bridges are being redesigned to allow for rapid sediment flows without catastrophic failure. Small engineering interventions can prevent secondary disasters and are often far cheaper than replacing entire transportation corridors.
education is another front. Fire curricula in schools, community planning workshops, and practical training for local officials change the culture of risk. When children learn map reading for evacuation routes or how to create household emergency kits, resilience becomes a lived skill in the community rather than an abstract policy.
Media and misinformation play a surprisingly big role. During a major event, rumors about arsonists, withheld water releases, or conspiracies about controlled burns can inflame tensions and misdirect resources. Media literacy campaigns focused on emergency misinformation, teaching people how to verify official channels and report suspicious content, are now part of preparedness toolkits.
And the arts matter. Songwriters, poets, and visual artists translate the rawness of post-fire landscapes into shared narratives that help communities grieve and imagine new futures. Public art installations made from charred timber, community storytelling festivals, and youth-led memorial gardens create social glue that accelerates healing.
Looking ahead, climate adaptation and biodiversity goals are converging. Restoration projects increasingly select species mixes that support pollinators and wildlife corridors, recognizing that resilient landscapes provide multiple benefits: flood control, carbon storage, and habitat connectivity. That landscape-scale thinking moves us from single-issue fixes to integrated stewardship.
And finally, there's hope in innovation hubs, where scientists, community leaders, and startups prototype solutions, from seed bomb drones that prioritize native species to local microgrids that reduce dependence on vulnerable regional electricity systems. The projects that succeed combine technical rigor with deep community trust.
When we ask whether wildfires are nature's fury or the human hand, the honest answer in the aftermath is both, and also something more complicated. They reveal our vulnerabilities, but they also reveal our capacity to reimagine society. Recovery isn't just rebuilding what was, it's redesigning where and how we live so that landscapes and communities can coexist without repeating the same tragedies.
That's the real challenge and the real promise.